Welcome, skeptics and truth seekers, to Schoolhouse Crock, the podcast that fearlessly exposes the real deal behind public education in the state of Colorado. I am your host, Stacey Castile, and on this show, we're not here to sugarcoat. We're here to unveil the truths, challenge the norms, and unpack the crock of you-know-what that often goes unnoticed in the realm of education. Today, I have Amber Cecil joining me, and if you did not know, we are currently in the month of June. So that means we can now sit back and prepare to have every company in America start shoving down our throats the Rainbow Pride flag. Amber and I wanted to have this conversation because one of the things that we are both concerned about is not so much the adults who are celebrating Pride, but it's the companies that are geared towards children that are also making a big deal about it. And we want to have this conversation about why are we exposing young children to this topic. Amber, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You and I have talked about some of these companies that are geared towards children and them supporting Pride Month. I think that oftentimes they say, well, it's not about sexuality. It's your identity. And one, as Christians, we don't put our identity in our sexuality. Our identity's in Christ and in Christ alone. But when we are trying to force this conversation on children when they don't understand it, they're not developmentally prepared to understand it. What is the purpose? What is the motive behind that?
Well, and one of the things that I can think of is, for normal people, believing that sexualizing children is predatory. I mean, that's what most of us believe, right?
Yes.
But recently, it seems like parents and activists and educators and political allies and all of this, they're so comfortable with the idea that elementary and preschool and even younger children are already identifying as members of the LGBTQ plus community, that they need to be a part of celebrating Pride because they believe that children are intrinsically sexual. So they're already born that way, and that they need to understand and learn about sex and gender as soon as possible so that they'll be able to understand and discover their authentic sexual selves, even if they don't know that they're already gay or gender confused or trans or somehow other rainbow identifying. Even if they don't know it yet, they need to learn how to be accepting.
Yeah.
And that's like the push for this, is they say that children are born sexual and they may already be a part of this. They may be gay or trans, even if they don't know it. But even if they aren't, they need to learn how to be accepting.
Well, and I think that, when we have huge companies that are geared towards children that are pushing this as well, right? It's now forcing the children to think about it and to deal with it. And then naturally, right? Like people don't typically want to be unaccepting of others, right? Like we all, play nice and get along and be friends with everybody kind of a mentality. And so we want to do that naturally. But what is being missed here is that there's a way to be respectful to someone, to love everyone without having to push this ideology onto our children. And one of the things that I feel like was some of the most concerning to me was companies like Crayola, Play-Doh, Sesame Street. They've come out and they've posted in celebration of Pride Month. And I'm not sure how many people in their demographics are actually using social media, right? Because hopefully they don't have Facebook or Instagram because they're too young. But when you have popular children's icons like Miss Rachel saying that she wants to have Dylan Mulvaney on her show, parents need to see this as an alarm. They need to see that this is overstepping the boundaries. And if we go back to last year, right, Bud Light did a partnership with Dylan Mulvaney and it had some serious backlash against them.
Yeah, it backfired.
And although I do not support that, their Anheuser-Busch Bud Light's demographics, you legally legally by law have to be 21 years old. But that's not the case here for Crayola or Play-Doh, right? Like typically their target audience is under the age of 18. I love to color and use markers and crayons and all of that stuff. So I guess technically I would fall into the, Crayola's demographics for that, but I'm more of an outlier, right, than a typical targeted audience.
Right. And for them to just push the narrative through these companies, that's the really scary part to me. When they want children to go to parades. I've seen these parades. I've seen them, they even show them on TV. And there was a float of these men who were wearing banana hammocks who were barely covering any of their genitals. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, that wouldn't be appropriate for kids to see in any
Yeah,
situation.
whether they're straight or gay or whatever
E-
community they
Exactly.
identify as, 100%.
I don't care. Yeah, I don't care how a child identifies. To me, that's an adult trying to groom a child. There's no reason why grown men should be barely covering their genitals and parading around in front of children. I don't ever think that's okay. I don't ever think it's okay for women to barely cover their breasts and parade around in front of children either. I don't think there's any situation where that's an acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
When we have all of these kids going to drag queen shows and these parents are taking their children to it, young children too. I'm not talking even teens. I'm talking young children, sometimes preschool age, kindergarten, even young elementary age kids. And these men are dressed in drag and gyrating around children. And these children are being encouraged to put dollar bills to tip them with money. What are we teaching these kids as an okay behavior? When they're trying to say that it's body positive and to be trans positive and to be drag queen positive, because there's going to be people who come out, these kids might come out of it and want to be drag queen. Well, that's fine when they're 18.
Well, and that's
But
the
why are we encouraging that as children?
And that's the other very concerning thing because at these drag shows, specifically one that they had in Fort Collins, they had some people who were against the all age drag queen events, went in and actually identified some of the people who were dressing up in drag and dancing and gyrating and having dollar bills put in their clothing are actually teenagers, young boys who are doing this. And they're actually turning around and not only dancing for young children, but dancing for grown adults as well. That is just as disgusting and wrong on that side, as it is grown men dancing for young children.
In so many ways, there's so much perverse behavior in that. And the fact that people aren't seeing it really is what to me is the terrifying part of all of it. Going to like drag bingo as an adult or going to a place that has a drag show or something like that. I feel like as an adult, if that's your choice and that's something that you want to do, go live your life. I've always been that person who said, as long as it's not hurting anybody,
Yeah.
we're no longer not hurting anybody. We are now hurting children.
Yeah.
We're doing things to children that is unacceptable. We cannot do this to our kids. There's no reason we should be doing this to our kids. And the families that are LGBTQ plus and have children, they're exposing their kids to these types of things and they're not thinking that it has any kind of effect. Everything we do has an effect on our kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything we do. They are very impressionable. Everything we do has an effect on them. So how would this not also have an effect on them? When they're seeing people engage in very sexual behavior, how does that not play an effect in how they're going to behave as adults?
Yeah.
When they're seeing people engaging in very promiscuous and that sort of behavior, whether it's in an LGBTQ plus relationship or a non-LGBTQ plus relationship, those types of things carry on into their adult lives.
Yeah.
When you see women who go through men or they have bad men who are abusive, what usually happens with their daughters when
Then
they grow up?
start
What
going
types
after
of men do they pick?
bad, abusive men.
They tend to pick the same type of men because it's a learned behavior.
Yeah.
It is something that seems to happen. So why wouldn't we think this would be the same way?
One of the things that I don't get is let's think about things that we did with our parents when we were kids. We went to sporting events. We went to live music in the park. We went to things like that there was no sexuality. It wasn't like, yay, we're all straight. So why do we have to do things like this? For example, Ames Community College here in Greeley is having a pride event, and one of the things on their website discussing this event says, for families, a dedicated kids zone ensures the little ones have a day filled with crafts, story times and activities. Now, those things by themselves, no problem. But what kind of a spin is being put on these things? At the same time, teenagers can hang out in the teen zone, which includes video games and engaging activities. What does that mean? It's just so weird what they're trying to do just to be able to expose the children. Then it goes on to say, additionally, a scavenger hunt crafted for kids to explore the event adds an element of adventure to their Pride experience. So they're going to be having them go to all of these different booths, right? Like they're not just going there to do crafts. They're going to go there and see what other kind of booths that they have. Like why? What is the purpose of exposing our children to this type of an event? But it doesn't even just stop there. I was looking up events because I know in the past the High Plains Library has done events for Pride Month. And so I went to go look at their website to see which locations were doing what. And I was actually kind of surprised to see that only the Link library was really doing anything that they posted, right? So they all do
Right.
story hour and they don't tell you what stories they're reading. But the Link is doing a craft event where children can do pride parade floats. Also, a craft of show your colors. And they're doing a movie called Love Simon, which is based off of a book called Simon versus the Homo sapien Agenda. And it talks about a boy who's in high school who's gay and has a crush on another boy, and they send each other letters, but they don't know who each other are. And then finally, they're doing a Pride tie-dye event. Now, you can make parade floats, you can show movies, you can do tie-dyed, but why do we have to label it for Pride?
Exactly. Well, and children are suggestible and malleable, right? They
Yeah.
just are.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't that include their sexual orientation? Because all of the LGBT activists and their allies, they want every kindergarten to teach that boys can become girls and girls can become boys. They want every middle school to have an LGBT club.
The seven deadly sins, the first one that's typically referred to as pride, right?
Right.
Pride in any form of the word, whether you're talking about gay pride or financial pride or skill pride, right? Like that's all a sin. And why would we readjust this just to make somebody feel like they can be their authentic selves, right? Like, what about the people who don't buy into this? Then they don't feel like they get to be their authentic selves and they're
That's it.
told to sit down and shut up, right? Like their authentic selves don't matter. And we're teaching this to our children, right? Like we're trying to get them to buy into this as well. And it's really concerning. Something that all parents just need to be involved in their children's lives and have conversations with them so that they can have an understanding. You think your kid's watching Sesame Street and everything's okay? Yeah, probably not, after all. But just to be aware that everything may seem on the up and up, but it's a kid-friendly event, it's a kid-friendly show, something along those lines is not really in that situation. I mean, there is obviously a attack on our children.
They're so aggressive in their tactics. It's in the classroom, it's in culture, it's in social media, and they don't care. They're so determined to do this that they don't care what parents want, and they're going to do this no matter what. And that's basically what they've said. And that's why it's so important to follow the legislation that's happening. It's so important to get behind groups like what Erin Lee is doing, where they're trying to get some initiatives passed. It's so important to understand what's actually happening at those levels, because when they take away parents' rights, they will basically say, and this actually came down from President Biden saying with his guide for foster parents, that any steps you take to make your home welcoming and affirming to LGBTQ youth will benefit all children
Yeah.
and youth in your care. And any behaviors that openly reject youth LGBTQ must be avoided and will not be tolerated. And that is including religious activities and your family gatherings.
Yep.
So basically, the idea is that if you become a problem, we're going to remove your children.
Yep.
If you don't go along to get along, we're going to remove your children. And
Well,
I think there's probably more people who agree with us than agree to the other side, or maybe are more in the middle, but they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to make waves. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or do anything that's going to put a star on them or point a finger at them and call them out. So instead of,
Or they don't want to do anything that would potentially risk their children being taken away from them.
or that. And so instead of speaking up and saying this is wrong, they just go along with it. There's parents out there who are pushing for pride in preschools. What 4-year-old understands the rainbow outside of I like to draw a rainbow?
Yep. Yep. Well, and even, for example, the post that Play-Doh did for Pride Month, they made a pride flag out of Play-Doh, but it's not just the rainbow flag, it's the all-inclusive flag. And so, again, what 4-year-old understands transgenderism?
Kids just like other kids. I know that is something I always said. I remember when my daughter was little and we'd go somewhere, she'd see another kid. She was always so excited to see another kid. Kids like kids. They just like anything that you're teaching your child to be, whether it's racist or bigot or whatever it is, you're teaching your child to be that.
Yeah.
There are extremes. I would agree that there are extremes. There are people who are teaching hate. I would believe that, but it's on the other side too.
Yes.
There's people that are teaching their kids to hate what you and I stand for because we don't agree with the lifestyle that these folks are living. Well, you know what? I don't agree with the lifestyle all of my friends live either. I have Christian friends who outside of church behave like crazy animals.
Yep.
I don't agree with that. Those are also people that I'm not going to let speak into my life and teach me how to love Jesus.
Yes.
I'm not going to follow their way of life.
Well,
So
it's more like instead of cutting them out of your life, it's actually more of an opportunity for you to show them unconditional love in regards to, I don't agree with your behaviors and standing on that. Like, you're not going to ignore it. You're not going to turn a blind eye to it, but at least standing on it. But to say, but I still see value in you. I still see why God loves you. And so trying to help encourage them to start to live the way that Christ would want them to live.
and what I find, and you and I both know of this particular person who's on social media a lot, when we don't agree with the way he behaves, he comes at us very hard and is very cruel and very aggressive, very
Yes.
confrontational.
Yes.
It's not in a way that we would just sort of let it lie and be like, you do you, fine, you're going to do what you're going to do, but very aggressive if we don't just come alongside and agree in absolutely everything that they do. Well, we're not meant to agree
Yeah.
on everything as human beings. In fact, if we did, we would never have progress.
Agreed.
If we agreed on absolutely everything, we would never move forward with anything. So I'm grateful that we don't.
Well, and again, I will love you no matter your choices in terms of your sexuality, but I won't celebrate it because I believe that it's a sin. I believe the Bible, and in believing the Bible, I have to believe everything that it says is the truth. And so the Bible approaches this topic, the homosexuality topic, twice. And I don't think that there's any way that we can now say, oh, no, that's not true. It's not a sin, but I will still love you no matter what. But when you start trying to push that onto young children who are so impressionable, that's going to become a bigger problem.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Amber, and just having this conversation. I know it's not an easy one, but we need to at least alert other parents to be watchful for this because it's no longer corporations that's targeted audience is adults. It's now corporations whose targeted audience is young children. Well, thank you guys so much.